Hello again from southeastern Finland in Northern Europe. I still continue my series of events from selected years, and now it's time for 2014. In that year, midterm elections were held in the United States, in which the Republicans did well, anticipating their victory in the upcoming 2016 US presidential elections. A new European Parliament was elected for the European Union. The Sochi Winter Olympics were held in February 2014 in Russia. And then various other events, of course, took place, which we will look at in a moment. 2014 was a so-called common year of 365 days. And in the Gregorian calendar, it began on Wednesday. It was designated as the International Year of Crystallography, the International Year of Family Farming, the International Year of Small Island Developing States, and the International Year of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. On January the 1st, 2014, Latvia, a republic in the Baltic region of Northern Europe, officially adopted the euro as its currency, and became the Eurozone's 18th member. On January the 5th, a launch of the communication satellite GSAT-14 aboard the GSLV Mk.2D5 marked the first successful flight of an Indian cryogenic rocket engine. In February 2014, the Ebola virus epidemic in West Africa began, infecting at least 28,616 people and killing at least 11,310 people, the most severe both in terms of numbers of infections and casualties. The Sochi Olympic Winter Games lasted from February the 7th to 23rd in Russia. Slopestyle events were introduced for the first time. On February the 13th, Belgium, a small country in Western Europe, became the world's first country to legalize euthanasia for terminally ill patients of any age. On February the 22nd, the Verkhovna Rada, or Supreme Council, or the Ukrainian parliament, voted to remove President Viktor Yanukovych from office, replacing him with Mr. Alexander Turchinov after days of civil unrest, leaving around 100 people dead in Kiev, the Ukraine's capital. On March the 8th, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing 777 airline en route to Beijing from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia's capital, disappeared over the Gulf of Thailand with 239 people on board. Probably the aircraft crashed into the Indian Ocean. Pieces of it have been found, but a great majority of the fuselage remains lost, as well as the bodies of the victims. On March the 16th, 2014, a controversial Crimean status referendum was held, and Russia claimed that most of the participants voted for annexation, which Russia then unilaterally implemented on March the 21st. On March the 24th, during an emergency meeting, the United Kingdom, the United States, Italy, Germany, France, Canada, and Japan temporarily suspended Russia from membership in the G8, a group of eight major industrial industrialized countries of the world. On March the 27th, the United Nations General Assembly passed Resolution 68/262, recognizing Crimea within the Ukraine's international borders and rejecting the 2014 Crimean referendum's validity. On April the 10th, in response to the 2014 Crimean crisis, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe passed a resolution to temporarily strip Russia of its voting rights. Its rights to be represented in the Bureau of the Assembly, the PACE Presidential Committee and the PACE Standing Committee, and its right to participate in election observation missions. On April the 14th, an estimated 276 girls and women were abducted and held hostage from a school in Nigeria. On April the 16th, Korean ferry or South Korean ferry MV Seawall capsized and sank after an unmanageable cargo shift, killing 304 people, mostly high school students. On April the 27th, the Catholic Church simultaneously canonized or declared as saints Popes John the 23rd and John Paul II. On April the 28th, United States President Barack Obama's new economic sanctions against Russia went into effect, targeting companies and individuals close to Russian President Vladimir Putin. On May the 5th, the World Health Organization identified the spread of poliomyelitis in at least 10 countries as a major worldwide health emergency. Boko Haram militants killed approximately 300 people in a night attack on Gamboru Ngala. On May the 22nd, 2014, the Royal Thai Army overthrew the caretaker government of Niwat Thamrong, Bonsong Paisan, after a failure to resolve the political unrest in Thailand. On June the 5th, a Sunni militant group called the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, also known as the ISIS or ISIL, or right now as IS or Islamic State, began an offensive through northern Iraq, aiming to capture the Iraqi capital city of Baghdad and overthrow the Shiite government led by Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. From June the 12th to July the 13th, the 2014 FIFA or World Football Cup was held in Brazil and was won by Germany. On June the 19th, Felipe VI became the Spanish king upon the abdication of his father, Juan Carlos I. From July the 8th to August the 26th, amid growing tensions between Israel and Hamas following the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in June and the revenge killing of a Palestinian teenager in July, Israel launched Operation Protective Edge against Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, starting with numerous missile strikes, followed by a ground offensive a week later. In 7 weeks of fighting, 2,100 Palestinians and 71 Israelis were killed. On July the 17th, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, a Boeing 777 aircraft, which took off from the Schiphol Airport near Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Western Europe, crashed in eastern Ukraine, Eastern Europe, after being shot down by a missile. All 298 people on board were killed. The site was near Hrabove or Khrabove, Donetsk Oblast or region in the Ukraine. It was a scheduled passenger flight from Amsterdam to Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur. There were 283 passengers and 15 crew members on board. Contact with the aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, was lost when it was about 50 kilometers from the Ukraine-Russia border, and wreckage of the aircraft fell near Khrabove in Donetsk Oblast, Ukraine, 40 kilometers from the border. The shoot-down occurred in the war in Donbass during the Battle of Shakhtarsk in an area controlled by pro-Russian rebels. The crash was Malaysia Airlines' second aircraft loss during 2014 after the disappearance of Flight 370 on March the 8th. The responsibility for investigation was delegated to the Dutch Safety Board and the Dutch-led Joint Investigation Team, who concluded that the airliner was downed by a Buk surface-to-air missile launched from pro-Russian separatist-controlled territory in the Ukraine. In 2014, the American intelligence had said, for example, that Russia had supplied the Buk missile to pro-Russian insurgents and that the insurgents most plausibly shot down MH17 in error after misidentifying it as a military aircraft. Several conspiracy theories about the crash have since appeared in the Russian media, including that the aircraft was followed by a Ukrainian military jet. The Russian government holds the Ukraine responsible for the crash, claiming that the Ukraine should have redirected the civilian traffic away from the area of conflict. Several Ukrainian Air Force aircraft had been shot down over the rebel-controlled territory before the MH17 incident. Immediately after the crash, a post appeared on the VKontakte social media profile attributed to Mr. Igor Girkin, leader of the Donbass separatist militia, claiming responsibility for shooting down the Ukrainian An-26 military transporter near Torez. Later the same day, this post was removed and the separatists then denied shooting down any aircraft. On July the 17th at 2:01 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, a Russian news agency TASS posted eyewitness reports claiming that the Donbass militia had just shot down a Ukrainian An-26 military plane with a missile. In late July 2014, communications intercepts were made public in which it was claimed separatists were heard discussing an aircraft that they had downed. A video from the crash site recorded by the rebels and obtained by News Corp Australia showed the first rebel soldiers to arrive at the crash site. At first, they assumed that the downed aircraft was a Ukrainian military jet and were dismayed when they started to realize that it was a civilian airliner. So what happened almost exactly 5 years ago? On Thursday, July the 17th, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 departed from Amsterdam Airport Schiphol Gate G3 at 12:13 p.m. Central European Standard Time, or summer time, sorry, and took off at 12:31 p.m. the same time, so 18 minutes later. It was due to arrive at Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 6:10 a.m. on Friday, July the 18th, Malaysian time, or at 10:10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on July the 17th. According to the original flight plan, MH17 was to fly over the Ukraine at flight level 330 at 10,060 meters, and then change to flight level 350 around the Ukrainian city of Dnipropetrovsk. When it reached the area as planned at 3:53 p.m. local time or 12:53 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Dnipropetrovsk Air Control asked MH17 if they could climb to flight level 350 as planned, and also to avoid a potential separation conflict with another flight, Singapore Airlines Flight 351 or SQ351, also at flight level 330. The crew asked to remain at flight level 330, and the air control approved this request, moving the other flight to flight level 350. At 4 p.m. local time or 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the crew asked for a deviation of 20 nautical miles or 37 kilometers to the left or north of course on airway level 980 due to weather conditions. Dnipro Control ATC approved also this request. The crew then asked if they could climb to flight level 340, which the Dnipro Air Control Tower rejected because this flight level was not available, so MH17 remained at flight level 330. At 4:19 p.m. local time or 1:19 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Dnipro Control noticed that the flight was 3.6 nautical miles or 6.7 kilometers north of the center line of approved airway and instructed MH17 to return to track. At 4:19 p.m. Local time or 1:19 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Dnipro Control contacted Russian ATC in Rostov-on-Don by telephone and requested clearance to transfer the flight to Russian airspace. After obtaining the permission, Dnipro Control attempted to contact MH17 for handing them off to R&D Control at 4:20 p.m. local time or 1:20 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, but the aircraft no longer responded. When several unsuccessful or unanswered calls had been made, or after they had been made, Dnipro Control contacted R&D Control again to check if they could see the aircraft on their radar. R&D Control confirmed that the plane had disappeared. The Dutch Safety Board reported a last flight data recording at 4:20 p.m. local time or 1:20 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, located west of the urban type settlement Rozsypne near Hrabove, heading east-southeast at 494 knots or 915 kilometers per hour. At exactly 4:20:03 p.m. local time or 1:20:03 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, a Buk ground-to-air missile, which had been launched from an area east from the aircraft, detonated outside the aircraft just above the cockpit to the left. An explosive decompression occurred, resulting in both the cockpit and tail sections tearing away from the fuselage's middle portion. All three sections disintegrated as they fell rapidly towards the ground. The majority of debris landed near Hrabove, a village located north of Torez in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast. The debris spread over a 50 square kilometers area to the southwest of Hrabove. Possibly or probably, the fireball on impact was believed to have been captured on video. Photographs from the crash site show scattered pieces of broken fuselage and engine parts, bodies, and passports. Some of the wreckage fell close to houses. Dozens of bodies fell into crop fields and some fell into houses. 3 other commercial aircraft were in the same area when the Malaysian airplane crashed. Air India Flight 113, a Boeing 787 en route from Delhi to Birmingham. EVA Air Flight 88, a Boeing 777 en route from Paris to Taipei, Taiwan. And the closest aircraft, Singapore Airlines Flight 351, was 33 kilometers away, a Boeing 777 en route from Copenhagen to Singapore. The Dutch Prime Minister, Mr. Mark Rutte, complained about the lack of respect shown to the personal belongings of the dead, which were reportedly being looted. He initially announced his disgust about the bodies' handling that were reportedly being dragged around and thrown, but later stated they had been handled with more care than originally thought. On July the 21st, so 4 days after the crash, it was reported that 282 bodies and 87 body fragments were found, and still 16 bodies were missing. The first remains were flown to Eindhoven in the Netherlands on July the 23rd, moved there with Dutch Air Force C-30 and Australia C-17 transport aircraft, which landed at Eindhoven Airport just before 4 p.m. local time. The day after, another 74 bodies arrived. On August the 22nd, the bodies of 20 Malaysians of 43 killed in the incident arrived in Malaysia. The government announced a national mourning day with the ceremony broadcast live on radio and television. About 90 minutes after the incident, the Ukraine closed all routes in eastern Ukrainian airspace at all altitudes. The incident dramatically heightened fears about airliner shootdowns, leading to some airlines announcing they would avoid overflying conflict zones. In July 2015, Malaysia proposed that the United Nations Security Council set up an international tribunal to prosecute those deemed responsible for downing the aircraft. In June 2016, a Russian businessman claimed that the airplane's shooting down put an end to hopes of a Russian nation in the Ukraine and prolonged the war in Donbass. Okay, so let's return to the events of 2014. From July the 23rd to August the 3rd, the 2014 Commonwealth Games occurred in Glasgow, Scotland. On August the 8th, the United States military began an air campaign in northern Iraq to stem the influx of ISIL militants. On September the 18th, in a referendum, Scotland voted 55% to 45% against independence from the United Kingdom. On September the 28th, Benny Tai Yu-ting announced that Occupy Central was launched as Hong Kong's government headquarters were being occupied by thousands of protesters. Hong Kong police resorted to tear gas to disperse protesters, but thousands remained. On October the 3rd, 2014, a couple of weeks after, 2 to 3 weeks after the Swedish parliamentary elections, Social Democrat Stefan Löfven replaced moderate Fredrik Reinfeldt as the Prime Minister or head of government of Sweden. On October the 20th, Mr. Joko Widodo was inaugurated as the 7th President of Indonesia. On November the 2nd, 2014, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the final part of its fifth assessment report, warning that the world faced severe, pervasive, and irreversible damage from global emissions of carbon dioxide. On November the 3rd, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, the One World Trade Center, opened. On December the 3rd, the Japanese space agency JAXA launched unmanned space probe Hayabusa 2 from the Tanegashima Space Center on a 6-year round-trip mission to Ryugu to collect rock samples. On December the 16th, the Pakistani Taliban carried out a mass shooting at an army school in Peshawar, Pakistan, killing at least 145 people, mostly school children. On December the 17th, US President Barack Obama announced the resumption of normal relations between the United States and Cuba. And on December the 28th, Indonesia AirAsia flight 8501 from Surabaya, Indonesia to Singapore crashed into the Java Sea just southwest of Borneo, killing all 162 people on board. And then some personal notes. On June the 16th, if I remember correctly, my then fiancée, now wife, a Filipino lady, arrived to Finland for a visit, and then on July the 2nd, if I remember correctly, she departed. Both the arrival and the departure took place at the Helsinki-Vantaa International Airport in the city of Vantaa to the north of Helsinki in southern Finland. And in the second week of August, I then began a 5-week part-time substitute teaching work as the guidance counselor for grades 7, 8, and 9, if I remember correctly, at a grade school in the city of Vantaa. On October the 6th, if I remember correctly, I began another substitute teaching work as the History and Social Sciences or Social Studies substitute teacher at a lower secondary school in the city of Raasepori to the west of Helsinki in southern Finland. And then that work concluded on October the 30th, 2014. On October the 31st, I departed Finland in order to immigrate to the Philippines. I first flew to Britain, more specifically to the Heathrow International Airport in Western London. And then from there, I flew overnight to Hong Kong in southeastern China, and then finally arrived to the Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Malaysia. in Metro Manila, the Philippines, on the evening of November the 1st, 2014, local time. And then on December the 23rd, 2014, my fiancée and I got married in the city of Las Piñas in Metro Manila, the Philippines.